Well, hello and welcome to the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint live series. My name is Guy Stevens. I am the founder and executive director of the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. I will also be your host for the next hour or so as we have an opportunity to meet a fantastic guest, Dr. Peter Vermeulen, and I'm really excited about our show today. You might be noticing that we are here at an unusual time. It is 12:30. We often do this at a later time in the day. And when you have the opportunity to get amazing guests from all over the globe, sometimes you have to shift schedules a little bit. So we've moved up a little bit earlier today to be able to still do this live. So excited to have you here with us. Those of you that may not be familiar, if this is your first time joining us, want to say hello and thank you for being here today. If you are someone that's been part of our community and podcast for a long time, welcome back. It's great to have the familiar faces and names that always show up as we're doing these events. Really excited to have you. The Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint, of course, is a small nonprofit organization. We are located here in the United States, work across the country, sometimes work across the world, trying to influence changes in policy and practice and reduce and eliminate punitive exclusionary discipline and hopefully curb the school to prison pipeline. And of course, you know, we started out all around the use of seclusion restraint, trying to reduce and eliminate practices like that as well. So excited to have you here with us today. Excited to have you join us for this special guest. I do want to share a couple of quick announcements before we start with our discussion here today. So I'm going to bring up and mention to you that we have a new sponsor for our show this year. And I really greatly appreciate, when we have people that are willing to sponsor our work and the things that we're doing. It's really critical to what we do. And we're fortunate enough to have a brand new sponsor this year, and they are helping to support our podcast. So I want to introduce you to our sponsor this year, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and I'm going to share with you a special page. So Bowman Consulting, and I've gotten to know the Bowmans actually fairly well over the last couple of years, Doris and Rick Bowman. They have deep roots in mental health, public education leadership. They've been doing a lot of work over the past decade, really helping schools and systems nationwide align towards neuroscience-aligned, trauma-informed, neurodiversity-affirming practices. And of course, that sounds very familiar. That's aligned with our 5 principles as well. But they're looking to move people beyond kind of these punitive practices that we know that can cause so much harm. They've actually set up a special page for our podcast guests, and I have that shared here on the screen. I'll put the link in the chat here in a moment as well. But they wanted to share with you some of the special things that they offer and some of their tools. They're right now offering a special. They have a brand new book called Your FBA is a Fantasy. Any of you that have heard me talk about functional behavioral assessments before probably know that while I am very supportive of being curious around behavior, a lot of what we do in a typical FBA is not working for kids that really need help and support. They dive into the neuroscience and trauma-informed approaches to really help understand how to create a better support plan. And this isn't just about rewards and consequences and all those things that are so common to these approaches that are often ineffective. They're offering a 40% discount to the end of January on their book. So if you use this, the scan code here, now this unfortunately only applies right now in the United States. In fact, we were trying to get a code to work for Canada, and we're still trying to see if we can work something out. But they are offering 40% off for our listeners that are in the U.S., and we'll see if we can do something for our international listeners as well. They also have some great training coming up that I want you to be aware of. It's starting February 10th and March 3rd. They're doing some a 2-day training on trauma-informed, neuro-affirming FBA and behavior support plans. So check out the page. I'll put the link in the chat so you can learn more about it. And I want to thank the Bowman Consulting Group for being a sponsor for our show. It helps us to do this and bring it to you. So check them out and see what you think. And also check out the book. We did a podcast on it a couple months back. I do also want to say, before I bring my guest up here, if you are watching live right now, and I already know a couple of you are because I've seen a couple of comments here. If you're watching live, let us know in the chat who you are and where you're from. It's always really exciting to be able to share with our guests as well that we have people that join us from all over the world. So I'm excited to say hello to you and share your greeting as well. And with that, let's get to why we are here today. I want to bring up on our stage here Dr. Peter Vermeulen and tell you a little bit about him. He has a master's in Psychology and Pedagogical Sciences at the University of Leuven, Belgium, PhD in Psychology and Pedagogical Sciences at the University of Leiden, the Netherlands. And from 1987 to 1998, he worked for the Flemish Autism Association, first as a home trainer for families with a child with autism, later as director of home training center, and finally a trainer and lecturer. Then from 1998 till 2018, he worked as a senior autism consultant, lecturer, trainer for Autism Centraal, and he is the founder and director of Autism in Context. He presents worldwide and has given keynote addresses at many international conferences, including Autism Europe Congress, World Autism Congress, Asian Pacific Autism Congress, Conference rather, and the National Autistic Society and Scottish Autism. I actually had the opportunity to meet him for the first time on an event that we were doing with Studio 3 out of the UK. I was helping with the event, and I was really, what's exciting to me was the ability to kind of listen to Peter and some of the other amazing presenters that we had. I was like, oh gosh, gotta get Peter on the podcast if we can. So I think I emailed you right after that and said, hey, got an opening coming up. And then unfortunately after that, we're typically booking about a year out. So it was about a year ago, but here we are. And of course, you've written a lot of articles, over 150 articles on autism, as the author of more than 20 books on autism with translations in 10 languages. A lot of fantastic work out there. I'm Special, Autism in Context, Blindness, the predictive brain and autism, what really works with autistic children, have done some amazing work. And of course, when I got to hear you speak, and it was really a pleasure, you were talking about, kind of the predictive brain, and, the neuroscience has long interested me, and I probably even then felt like I had a pretty good footing, but I was learning a lot from you, and I found it really fascinating. So let me pause there and just say, welcome, Peter. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is a privilege to have you joining us, and we're really excited to have you here.
It's a pleasure being here, Guy, and good morning to most of you, because I think for most of you it's early morning or midday.
That's right. That's right. It's funny because when we do these, we started them a number of years ago, but we do get guests from all over the, world that'll join us, and often enough that I began knowing time zones. So when we usually do these in the later part of the afternoon, around 3:30 or so, I know that it's around 7:30 in the morning tomorrow in Australia and New Zealand. Now, we might be a little too early for our Australian and New Zealand friends today, but hopefully they'll be able to catch us a little bit later. Yeah. But it really is amazing. I think back to being a kid, and you can probably think about these times as well. The thought of making a call across the country seemed like a big deal, much less the idea that one day we would be able to talk to people across the world and collaborate and learn. And it's such an amazing thing. So excited to be able to chat with you today. We had a couple of hellos already, and I'll just share a few of those. Stacy said, good morning. This time works for me today, so that's good. And Stacy, I don't know where you are right now, but I know sometimes you're in Mexico, so I don't know if that's where you are today. Neurodivergent by nature is Pam on the beautiful west coast of Canada, and Pam is actually a Alliance volunteer as well. We've got somebody here joining us from Connecticut, so it's great to have a number of people putting comments in the chat. And again, if you're joining us, let us know in the chat who you are, where you're from, and as this conversation unfolds, if you have a question or a comment, please feel free to put it in the chat, and I'll try to share those with Peter as well. So it looks like Stacy is staying warm right now in Mexico. It is cold here, Peter. I don't know what the weather is where you are.
Over here it's cold and gray and wet. So
yeah. Well,
Stacy, I'm coming over.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We have about that much ice right now. We got a big snow and ice storm, and for us it turned out to be mainly ice. So the parking lot outside of my office, I could probably do a figure skating, a competition here. Well, listen, it's great to have you. And as I mentioned in the intro, I've heard your name many times over many years, but the first chance I really had to hear you speak was at the event being held by Studio 3. And that event that you did really was just fascinating to me. I've taken a dive into some of the neuroscience, and I think about people like Lisa Feldman Barrett and some of the amazing work that's done out there. But what I was hearing from you just really began to change some of my thoughts. And I know kind of your work, kind of Autism in Context to start with, is really about changing perspectives, ideas, and then ultimately how we better, how we better work with other human beings, how we better work with autistic individuals, and can make a positive difference. So why don't we start kind of really from the basics of, what you do today, but kind of what your path was getting here. How did you kind of end up down this pathway where you started focusing on, training and lecturing and this work that you do today?
Well, I got involved in autism by coincidence. There's nothing romantic about it. I needed a job. There was a vacancy at the Flemish Parental Society, and they hired me, not because I was knowledgeable about autism. I did not know anything about autism, but I knew how to set up parent courses. So they hired me for my skills for setting up courses, and they said, well, the autism thing, we can teach him that. And only a couple of weeks later, I had to go through a training, by the way, done by people from the United States Teach Division, North Carolina. We were
Yeah, familiar. Yeah.
we were inspired from the people from Teach. And that was a practical training. And I met a boy, and I was responsible for having lunch with the boy. Now, that was the very first boy on the autism spectrum I ever met in my life. And he was kind of a mystery to me. I could not read his behavior, I could not read his needs, and probably he could not read my behavior either. And that's when I got triggered by, okay, I see your behavior, I see what you're doing, but why? And the why is in the brain, of course, because our behaviors are the result of how we experience the world. Our behaviors are reactions to the world. And that's when my journey started to one big discovery of how autistic brains work. But if you want to know how autistic brains work, you need to know how so-called typical brains work. And that's how my journey started. And I must say, the last couple of years have been very exciting because of a kind of Copernican revolution. And with Copernican revolution, I mean that everything that I learned about brains when I graduated from university and when I got my PhD seem to be wrong. Our brain doesn't work the way we think it works. And you could say, okay, nice, Peter, just interesting for academics. No. My biggest interest in brains has always been because I wanted to understand those brains in order to help the people who have that brain. Because, we all show empathy towards autistic people and neurodivergent people, but empathy requires two things. It requires the intention to support another person and to understand, but it also requires knowledge. And that's the thing what I do, and that's how I got this far. I've always been studying. I never stop reading, and I learn new things. And what I do is try to translate the sometimes highly technical and academic articles into practical examples that parents can use, that teachers can use, that therapists can use. Am I that special? No, I'm just trying to bridge two worlds, the worlds of the academics and the researchers and the worlds of autistic people themselves and the people around them who love them and support them.
And you've done a lot of writing about kind of autistic thinking and kind of this idea of autism in context. Here at the Alliance, we have an audience that's pretty broad. We have a lot of parents and caregivers, a lot of self-advocates, a lot of educators. But I'm just kind of curious, like, how do you explain to parents or educators or others kind of about this idea of kind of autism in context and what they're often missing about kind of understanding how how the brain works, whether it be a neurotypical brain or a neurodivergent brain?
Every brain tries to predict the world, because if we can anticipate to what's going to happen to us, we have higher chances for survival. So that's, survival of the fittest is survival of the ones who can predict best what's going to happen. All brains do that. But the big difference between non-autistic and autistic brains is that autistic brains are using models in their brain that are highly absolute and less context sensitive. And I always say, autism should not be a disability at all, but it is in many circumstances because autistic brains want absolute models, but the world doesn't do an absolute. It's the fact here that time is even not absolute. It's midday in the United States, but it's probably early morning in somewhere else. Time is relative, and everything is relative, and that's what is difficult for autistic people. And once you understand that they are struggling with the ambiguity and the relativity and mainly the uncertainty of the world, then it becomes much easier to understand them. For instance, one example, why is interacting with other people so difficult for autistic individuals? Well, because social interaction doesn't use rules or absolutes. What is friendly in one context is maybe unfriendly in another one. What is polite, sometimes I hear people talk about socially appropriate behavior. That does not exist because socially appropriate is very relative. Maybe I can ask you for your age, Guy, but I know that for some women, they don't like to be asked for their age.
I'm not sure I do anymore either, but
yeah. What is a good appropriate physical distance? Even that can change in circumstances. We can shake hands, but we couldn't during COVID. What was polite was suddenly not polite, and COVID is just one big example of how relative the world is. And then, of course, it was on a huge proportion. But take it into daily life. What you have for a drink. If I would ask you, okay, Guy, what do you want to drink? Well, that's not an absolute thing. That's relative on context. It's relative on what you like to drink, but it's also relative for the time of the day. I think in the evening, well, it's a little bit more appropriate to say, oh, I want a glass of wine than 7:30 in the morning. So you see, and that what makes the world so hard to survive and to navigate for autistic individuals.
And understanding that, one of the, this is an area where I think there is progress, not as much progress as I would like to see in many areas, but I think we're making some progress in certain areas. For example, I think one of the things that has been pretty prevalent here for a long time is kind of the use of the medical model around understanding disability, understanding individual differences. If we take that and looking at autism, it's looking through a lens of deficit and disorder and dysfunction and deviation from what is considered typical. And of course, I think that the kind of neurodiversity movement and beginning to understand that brains are different, and kind of a shift to more of a social construct around let's not try to reshape or change people that are different from us, but let's figure out how we better support them. So I think there's some positive shift that's been happening over the past few years, but there's still a lot of places where I continue to see it not happening, and people continuing to try to take those those neurotypical expectations and kind of force them on people that think and process the world differently. And you've been doing this work for some time as well, and I'm sure you've seen a tremendous change. And again, with that change, there's a point where you want to say, well, gosh, it's all changed and it's all better. And of course it never is. It lags and it takes time. But tell me, how you're seeing things evolve over the time that you've been involved with this, and how maybe like the voice of lived experience maybe has influenced the work that you do, and what that has meant, kind of for looking at these areas and these questions as a whole.
Oh, it influenced me a lot because my interest in brains is always a way of asking people how they experience, because I can read the academic stuff, but since I wanted to bridge the academic world to the daily world, I was curious to see if what I read in articles was also experienced by autistic individuals. So I've been working with autistic individuals from the beginning, and right now everything I do is co-creation, because I learn from them and they learn from me, and together that's how we can make these positive changes. And I started kind of to respect their way of seeing and understanding the world, although sometimes it leads to a lot of stress for the autistic individuals themselves and for the environment. As a matter of fact, my newest book is a book, Life Hacks. It was just published a couple of weeks ago in the United States. It's written completely together with autistic individuals.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic. What's the title of that? I'm going to have to look it up now.
It's 250 life hacks for young autistic adults. And,
Gotcha.
you know, we did this all together, and I learned a lot from them. Everything is from the predictive coding perspective, but in a very easy, simple language. But what they did is translate the predictive coding perspective into tips that they shared with each other. And I was just kind of the ghostwriter. I was so happy to be amongst them. And I even learned some tricks and tips that I thought, wait a minute, they are useful for not only for autistic individuals, but for everybody. For instance, one of the things that is quite difficult for autistic individuals is to monitor their energy balance. That's why some get ultimately into a burnout. And I learned from them, you need to plan your crash time and not wait until you crash. And I think, yeah, this is so important for all of us, because and in that way, we can learn a lot from the experience of autistic people to make the world better, even for non-autistic people. And that's the new time we are living in. We stopped seeing many so-called autistic behaviors as things that needed to be fixed. Now we see it as human reactions to a world, and we're making big progress.
Right.
But it remains difficult, I see, both for parents and professionals, when autistic people react in such a way that it becomes a little bit unpredictable for their environment,
right,
or difficult for their environment to cope with. Everybody now is in favor of neurodiversity and neuroaffirmative approach of people, until somebody hits you because they are in a panic attack.
Right.
And then it becomes difficult to maintain the law for neurodiversity. So that's still the part where we are struggling, I think.
Right. And that's where we see things like restraint and seclusion coming up. If you look at the data around the use of physical restraint and seclusion, overwhelmingly it's children with disabilities, but autistic children are always the highest represented in that. And again, I think a lot of it comes from, where those things break down, where that the good intent of supporting, neurodivergent individuals begins to, lose way to, a big behavior that in the moment dysregulates the adult and then leads to, kind of an escalation.
Yeah.
I'm going to put in the chat.
We're always very empathetic until the moment somebody near us gets dysregulated, and then we get dysregulated, and it's hard to be nice to each other when both are dysregulated. But that's only human. But it doesn't mean that we cannot learn.
Right. Well, yeah, and it's only human, but an adult with a fully developed brain is in a better position and has more skills and tools at their ability than a young autistic child who is dysregulated, who may be overwhelmed by something going on in the environment or something else. And I think that there's a big part of this that comes to the caregiver or the professional that are supporting individuals. So while you were saying that, I ordered your book, by the way, and I just put a link in the chat, and I see Pam did as well. That sounds like a fantastic book, and I love. This book sounds amazing, and I love that it really is centered on the voices of lived experience, and I think that that's another place where I'm really happy to see progress being made, but it's hard. It's a hard shift, and I think that. I'm still, while I'm hopeful and optimistic about certain things, I'm still a little pessimistic that some of the common practices that people have in place in schools and in other kinds of settings are not serving individuals well. And especially when we talk about neurodivergent learners, we're talking about autistic or ADHD or fetal alcohol syndrome or a whole host of conditions that kind of fall under that neurodivergent umbrella, many of the things that we're doing are not working well. Yet, we continue to do more and more of those things, a lot of which are kind of rooted in behaviorism and in reward and consequence models, where really kind of shifting your understanding is far more impactful than trying to reward away a behavior that's coming from a place of dysregulation or a sensory overwhelm or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. I think what is a challenge for especially for schools and for many environments is that until now we of course, when you start living together or working together or studying together, we need rules. But most schools start with the rules and then check whether everybody follows the rules. And when you're following the rules, you're a good student. When you're not, then people start trying to work on you. And I think we should start from something else. When you live together with other people, the first thing that you need to look for is everybody feeling good here? And it's only when you feel good that people will follow the rules. Somebody who is not feeling well probably doesn't have the cognitive abilities or the self-control or whatever to follow the rules. So the second change that I made in my career was not only from behavior to mind, but figuring out how that mind worked. The next step was we need to make sure that all these brains feel good, because then, only then, will they be able to collaborate with other people, to be nice to other people, or in terms of schools, will they be able to learn? Come on, how much do we learn when we are stressed? How much do we learn when we are confused by our environment? So I think everything starts with that, with well-being.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's that felt safety, right? It's the do I feel safe? If you are dysregulated, you're not going to reach that thinking, logical, rational, collaborative part of your brain if you're, kind of in a state of dysregulation. The other thing you said in that I mean resonates with me quite a bit, but the value of no human should be contingent upon their ability to comply. And very often that's the case. We do a lot of things that put value on humans, especially when we're talking about students with disabilities in schools. Oftentimes value and reward, recognition, whatever the case may be, is all tied with your ability to comply. And I think that fully misses the point that a lot of reasons fall beneath why an individual hasn't been able to meet a demand or comply in a moment. And when you look at it as just a matter of intent, you're totally missing the boat. There's so much more.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
If you don't feel happy and safe,
I know. I don't think there are many children born with the intention not to be nice to other people and not to comply.
Right.
All children, I think, well, except maybe a very small minority that you could maybe populate one small island on this globe with, but most children want to comply. Most children want to please parents and teachers. The thing is, when your brain works differently, sometimes it is much harder to meet the demands of the adults, not because you don't want to, but for instance, in the case of autism, because you don't understand what they ask from you. I remember that a girl was, and that's the autistic thinking again I'm talking about, a girl that she went to the doctor with her mother and she needed an injection. And the doctor said, "Come on, give me your arm." And the girl refused and started to yell. And then you think, oh, okay, again, the usual explanations are done. She's afraid and maybe it's going to do pain. But she said, "No, I want to keep my arm." That's the autistic.
Right. Give me your arm. Right.
Give me your arm.
Right,
It's like, I'm not ready for
Right.
amputation yet.
Sure.
And so that's the context blindness that I talked about before. A non-autistic child would maybe also be fearful for the pain of the injection, but would understand that this doctor, when asking, "Give me your arm," is only wanting to help you. And seen in that context, you don't think, and that's the autistic thinking again. And that's why there's a lot of misunderstanding about the reasons why children do not always comply or do not meet the demands. And I hate it when children are then being labeled for that.
Right.
I think pathological demand avoidance to start with. To call it pathological means that you take a distance rather than trying to understand why a child avoids a demand. And of course, it's not nice as a parent or a teacher that a child does not comply.
Yeah, well, I like the other side of that, kind of the pervasive demand for autonomy. Kind of, we're hearing that language being used a lot, but kind of the idea that in a setting, and we see this, I think, a lot in like the medical settings. But I think there's often low expectations, a lack of respect for individuals' bodily autonomy, and when that happens, I think when you don't have appropriate expectations and you don't respect people's autonomy, that kind of sets up sometimes some of that conflict that can arise. Sometimes it just takes an extra minute to explain something or to understand it from a different perspective, right?
Yeah. But I'm also a bit careful that people should not interpret this as lower your expectations towards neurodivergent people,
right?
Because lowering expectations is like saying,
right,
well,
right.
I don't believe you have the abilities,
right.
I think we should maintain high expectations.
Absolutely.
Also for the behavior of children, we should maintain high expectations, but give high levels of support so they can meet the expectations.
That's right.
And the two go along. Because if it leads to, okay, you're autistic, we will not ask you to do this or that, that's kind of disrespectful. That's kind of saying, I don't believe in your strengths.
Right.
And well-being is not being challenged anymore. I think we all want to be challenged, because if people challenge us, it means that they think we can do that.
Right.
And that's a kind of strengths-based approach, I think.
Agreed. And I'm a big proponent of curiosity. I'm a big proponent of like asking questions and wondering why. And I think the important thing is if someone is not meeting your expectation, really kind of understanding the deeper why, not making assumptions, not, but so often there's so much more beneath the surface. It's not just a matter of they weren't complying, but, there was something getting in their way. There was we all have fluctuating capacity. We all have things that influence us. And I think as adults and caregivers, sometimes we jump away from that curiosity into making assumptions, and I think that can be so harmful as well.
I love that word, curiosity. A Greek philosopher once says, curiosity is the beginning of philosophy and of all wisdom, and indeed it is. And we lose curiosity along the way, because if you look at young children, they are so curious about the world, and they dare to ask questions that sometimes we as an adult don't dare to ask anymore. Because we lost the curiosity of a small child. And that's why I'm very childish in my behavior. My wife doesn't always like it, but I think I
can be too. So
I never want to grow up. I never want, because then I would lose my curiosity.
That's right. Well, and you couple curiosity with humility, right? This is about realizing that you don't always have all the answers. It doesn't matter, how many letters you have after your name, or how deeply you've dug into a subject, or how many years. I'm sure you could attest to working in this area for years and years. When you sat down with the people and worked with autistic individuals in that book that you were producing, you were learning more. And I think that curiosity with humility is really important to all this work.
Guy, you don't want to know how many stupid things I did in my life with autistic people. You don't want to know. I made a lot of mistakes, but the thing is, as long as you afterwards think, okay, that was not good, what can I learn from that? Then it's called learning. But also what I learned is nobody's perfect. And what I also learned from the autistic ambassadors, because that's how we call them, the autistic individuals I work together with, is that they forgive us. Some of them even say, you neurotypicals will never understand it. But you know what? We learn to live with it. Learn to live with it. And I think, okay, I'm not perfect. Nobody is perfect. What if we would create a world that starts embracing our imperfections? Whether the imperfections are being labeled with diagnoses like ADHD, which is an imperfection in attention and activity. Nobody's perfect, and that's the whole neurodiversity thing. There's there's no normal brain. There's
Right,
no
right.
perfect
It's
brain.
it's not sitting there in Belgium on a shelf somewhere, right? This is the
Well,
neurotypical
no,
brain.
the only thing we have over here in Belgium is the perfect peer.
Yeah.
It's Manneke Pis on near the Market Square in Brussels, who pees 24/7. We can perfectly pee, but we don't have perfect brains in Belgium.
That's good to know. That's good to know. I want to pause for a
If you
second.
want, if we want to get toilet trained, come over here.
Well, there you go. Well, I'm looking for a reason to travel internationally right now. You and I talked about that earlier, but maybe one day. I want to just shift to a couple of comments here. Stacy did say that it's nice and warm in Mexico, so not so much in Canada though, although not icy. We had Andy saying hello from St. Paul, Minnesota. Andy, you and everyone in Minnesota are in our hearts and on our minds, and appreciate you being here today. Pam, another comment here, neuroharmony all the way. Stacy said that she believed that you presented together at an event in 2020. So, and that learned, that's where Stacy learned about your books. Chantel said hello, our lead Canadian volunteer, and excited to listen as well. Let me just see what else we have here. And we were talking about your book, and Pam mentioned she's already started reading. Another comment here from Divina said, beautifully explained. Non-compliance is a social skill. That sounds like a shirt, Stacey. We got to make a shirt out of that. Stacey said literal thinking needs to be considered when communicating with autistic individuals. Appreciate the comments here. I do want to let people know our show is a little bit shorter today. Peter has another meeting today, so we've got a little under 10 minutes left. But I am really enjoying this conversation already, and could go for quite a while. But I wanted to shift a little bit and go back to that presentation that you gave, the presentation that you gave for the Studio 3, and you were talking about kind of this idea of the predictive brain and autism. And I wonder if you could just dive into that a little bit more. I found that really fascinating. And of course, a lot of this comes back to then, knowing the predictive nature of the brain. How do we create more predictable worlds? So could you talk a little bit about that in the time we have here?
Yeah, well, I think what I learned from the predictive coding is that uncertainty is the biggest problem for autistic brains. And that if you want to create an autism-friendly environment, you need to take away the uncertainty and replace it with certainty, predictability, and control. And many of the so-called autistic behaviors or criteria are human reactions to uncertainty. So, and that changed my thinking around a couple of things. For instance, around the sensory issues, because nowadays we think that the sensory issues in autism are sensory, and that leads us to reduce the sound, take away the light, and then it's autism friendly. I never understood it because some of our autistic ambassadors, one of them, and I co-presented already with her on the European Congress, she's one of the biggest fans of Metallica and Rammstein.
I happen to be a Metallica fan as well, so
Okay, so I will ask you, Guy, is that low arousal, is that low stimulus Metallica if you go to a concert with 20,000 Metallica fans?
Right.
That's...
It's pretty it's pretty
tough,
high energy. Well, I'll share with you that there's a lot going on in the world right now. I have a playlist I made recently, which is kind of my angry music, and I consider that my therapy. It kind of helps me to calm down, believe it or not.
But then people think, but take away all the noise and then it's autism friendly. But how can you then explain that my colleague and ambassador enjoys being amongst 15, 20,000 Metallica fans in a huge football stadium, and where the music is loud, where there's a lot of people? And then I thought, it's not the sound itself, it's mainly the unpredictability of sound. Because if you look at when autistic people complain about sensory issues, it will always be about sensory input that is unpredictable and uncontrollable. And that's the game changer that the predictive coding offers to us, that we should not only think about reducing stimuli, but that we should give autistic people more control over their sensory environment, but also make the sensory environment more predictable. If you know it's going to be loud, then you can better cope with it. And the last thing is, we see that they can take in a lot of sensory input when the activity is connected to their interests. But also, it's not just the interest. But if you are a Metallica fan, I think you listen a lot to Metallica, which means that their songs and their music become highly predictable, because probably from the first guitar riff, you know what song it is. I wouldn't. I can, I know how to predict music from Mozart and some jazz musicians, but not Metallica. And that's the problem, that we should create environments that when people think about sensory-friendly environments, they think about quiet rooms. And I think, come on, this is such a reduction of the complexity of the problem. Yeah, quiet rooms are a good idea, but it's more than creating quiet spaces. It's creating spaces where people, if they want noise, like you, to calm down and to therapy for yourself, they should be allowed to play Metallica. So silencing headphones, I think this is kind of a reduction of the complexity.
Right. This is about, especially I think really understanding the individual differences, right? There's a famous quote, I don't know who it gets attributed to, but it's kind of the idea that you meet one autistic individual, you met one autistic individual, right?
Yeah, that's Stephen Shore. And I would say autism friendliness starts with, even though autism is a general label and autistic people share a lot of the same characteristics, autism friendliness starts with, and you will be happy I use the word again, Guy, curiosity. What do you need to feel good? And for some it will be Metallica, and for some it will be a silencing headphone, and for some it will be the silencing headphone in one context, but Metallica in another one. So let's not develop absolute thinking about autism and put autistic people in stereotyped one-liners about autism.
Right. No, I mean, that's such an important point. And again, the point is that when you lead by curiosity, it's okay to learn things that might work for one individual or another. But if they're not working, you don't double down and continue to do them. You get curious and you try to find out things that will work, and you ask questions and you involve, you collaborate. Like I'm such a big believer, often, if you look at some of this work historically, it was about doing things to people or doing things for people. And it's like when you shift into doing things with people, doing things alongside of people, and you lead with curiosity, you're going to come to solutions that are going to better support everyone involved.
Yes. And I think the whole predictive coding leads to one strategy. And it's curiosity about what kind of predictability do you need to feel good? Or what are your questions about the world? That's the uncertainty. And if you start asking that, tell me, what do you want to know? And of course, the form of your questions should be age appropriate. You do it differently with an adult and with a child. But rather than saying, what's your problem? Tell me what is difficult. What I've learned is, what do you want to know? What do you need? And that's, that makes it a lot easier for me to understand autistic individuals and to support them, but it makes it also easier for them to express their needs.
Yeah, I hear you. So unfortunately, our time is running out here, and I promised to get you out on time because you've got another obligation. I did want to share your website here, and I put the link in the chat as well. But you do a lot of speaking in addition to all of the books, and of course the one book that we mentioned a moment ago that just came out, which I've already placed my order for as we were talking here. But you also offer some services and consulting as well, and you mentioned that you do things here in the U.S. kind of virtually, of course. But tell us a little bit more about the things you're doing, and
Well, basically, I'm doing two things now. I'm doing a lot of trainings and courses on the predictive brain because it's a complex thing, and I want to help parents and teachers to understand this complexity by giving a lot of practical examples. But the second line of my work right now is I've developed an autism-friendly program for well-being, because well-being strategies like mindfulness and relaxation, they are evidence-based. But you cannot do copy-paste with autistic individuals because their brain processes the information differently. So that's my actually the biggest workload for the moment is either making plans for autistic individuals, training people to make plans, and now I'm setting up centers all over the world, where I hope other people will continue my work and set up
Love it.
happy coach training centers.
Love it. Love it.
Because I have a big dream.
Yeah.
I'm not that young anymore, but I hope that by the time I get on pension, which is not immediately yet, that every year there will be 5,000 autistic individuals who receive an individualized happiness plan.
I love that. I love that individual happiness plan. We've reached our time. I'm not going to keep any longer. I'd love to have you back again sometime and to continue the conversation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all the work that you do. I appreciate everybody joining us here today. I'm going to let you go, but Peter, it really was an honor to have you here, and thank you so much for joining us today.
I need to thank you. It was an honor being here, and yeah. Time flew.
It did. It really did. It really did. I've got about 3 more hours worth of conversation I want to have with you, but I'd love to have you back again sometime.
Maybe next time. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. You take care. We'll let you go here, and thank everybody again who was with us today. I'm going to go ahead and get us out of the studio here.